Today, we're going to talk about why the recent felony convictions of Donald Trump are leading many of his former critics to now become part of Team MAGA. That's what we'll talk about today. Hello, I'm Eric Simmons, your host, editor-in-chief of Crisis Magazine. And also, I am recovering from some type of sickness. So this is not an AI-generated version of my voice. It really does sound like this right now. Although if I was really AI-generated, I'd probably say that, wouldn't I? You'll just have to figure it out. Okay, so before we get started, I just want to encourage people to smash that like button. Smash it like a liberal judge prosecutes Donald Trump. Also, subscribe to the channel, let other people know about it, and subscribe to our email newsletter. Go to crisismagazine.com, subscribe to our email newsletter there. Put your email address in. We'll send you our articles once a day, 2 articles a day, every day, right into your inbox. Also, I want to say we finished our fundraiser, our spring fundraiser. We do 2 a year. It was a very successful fundraiser. I really do appreciate everybody who supported us. We were raising $100,000 and we were able to do that. And I really do appreciate everybody who contributed. We'll try not to bother you again until the winter, probably around December, something like that, for some end of year donations. So we couldn't do it without you. So I really do want to say thank you again. Okay. So some people who kind of followed me in the past, kind of my writings and my podcasts and all that, they're going to know what I'm going to say here at first about me, but I just want to kind of go over it anyway. It should be clear to most people who followed anything I've written that I've never been a Trump fan. In 2016, I haven't been a Trump fan since the 80s and 90s. I read his book, Art of the Deal, I think it was, in whichever one it was that was the big deal. It came out in the late 80s. And I was like, okay. But it just seemed to me, I just wasn't that impressed with it. But when he decided to run for president in 2016, I was very much opposed to him. I supported Rand Paul in the primaries. I was Republican, but I was already very frustrated with the Republican Party. But I was very much against Trump. I was a never Trumper. I'll say it right here. I was never Trump. Now, I wasn't a never Trumper like a leftist Trump derangement syndrome kind of person. I've never had that, but I've always been not a fan of his. And so when he was running in 2016, I opposed him. I publicly said, I'm not going to vote for him. And I didn't vote for him. In the end, I did not vote for Hillary Clinton, of course. Never voted for a Democrat for president because I'm not insane and I'm Catholic. And so I didn't vote for him then. And in fact, I left the Republican Party because of the Trump. Now, I will say that was kind of the final straw. I couldn't stand, I had no respect for Romney, for McCain. I ended up not liking Bush in the end. I just was very unimpressed with the Republican Party. I said, I'm out of here. And so then in 2020, when he's running for re-election, as we led up to the election, I was thinking about not voting for him again. But in the end, I did vote for him. I voted for Trump in 2020 reluctantly. I wasn't enthusiastic about it. I wasn't going around telling other people they should vote for him. I just simply was like, well, I'm going to vote for him because I felt like in the situation with Biden and with everything going on in the country, I thought that, okay, I'm going to do this. And other candidates, third-party candidates, weren't that impressive to me. And by the way, I'm a big third-party guy. I vote for third parties a lot. And then coming up on this election, 2024, I was pretty convinced that I likely would not vote for Trump in 2024 because, frankly, I just was so unimpressed with how he handled COVID. I don't think he's very strong on abortion. Yes, I do know what he did with the Supreme Court, and I'm thankful for that, and I commend him for that. I've done that in the past. But I just wasn't that impressed with him, and I really felt like there was I don't like him, and so his policies I just did not think would be very good. I did not support him, and in fact, I wrote an article and I had a podcast about this a couple months ago that I might not vote at all. That there's a decent chance that I would not vote because I felt like the election is probably rigged. All the candidates are part of the system, and so I just wouldn't vote. Now, I will say during this, I have been very much concerned, annoyed with the attempts to silence Trump, to get him out of the legal attempts to try to get him out of the running. I always felt like that was wrong. Like, if Donald Trump is the one that most people want in the Republican Party to be a nominee, he should be a nominee. We should be allowed to vote for him if we want to. And I knew exactly what those were. Those legal attempts were just simply attempts to try to get him out of the election, get him out of the running, and have it be another candidate. And I've been very much opposed to that as well. And I didn't like that. And so I've been doing that. And now, of course, what do we have? Just last week, it was announced that Donald Trump was convicted on 34 counts, 34 felony counts. I mean, this sounds awful. I mean, he's basically one of the worst human beings who ever lived, right? I mean, he's convicted. That means he's guilty, right? A jury of your peers. What else are all the midwits saying on Twitter? They're basically saying he is just this terrible person because, look, he's a convicted felon. I mean, the term convicted felon has probably been used more on social media in the last week than ever in the history of the world. Now, I'm not going to go into super details about the conviction because they're just a joke. I mean, ultimately what happened is the basic 64,000 foot view is simply that someone on Trump's team might have committed a misdemeanor for an accounting error of basically classifying a certain expense in the wrong way. And that at most is a misdemeanor. Possibly the Trump team is guilty of that. I don't know, but it's possible. I think there's reasons to think maybe not, but let's just say, okay, well, why is he now charged with 34 felony counts? Well, what makes it a felony is the idea, what makes that a misdemeanor, a felony in this case is if you do that misdemeanor to cover up another crime, then that's a felony. But here's the thing. Nobody can say what the crime is that he was covering up. Nobody. The judge couldn't say it. None of the pundits can say it. None of the anti-Trump forces can say it. Nobody can say what it is actually that he's covering up. So the whole thing is a joke. And I think everybody knows it's a joke. Like I said, at most, it's a misdemeanor. Now, that being said, let's assume it was a misdemeanor. Okay. We've had an implicit agreement in this country that we don't go after presidents or major presidential candidates for stuff like that. Because frankly, you know, and I know every single one of them is guilty of these type of things. Think about what a massive operation is running for president. I guarantee Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, Mitt Romney, Barack Obama, all of them, on their team, there have been misdemeanors committed. And honestly, I don't think we should go after anybody, nor in that situation, because honestly, it's just not worth it. If it was an egregious abuse of power, that's one thing. But we're talking about basically a mischaracterization of an accounting classification. So we've agreed to this. So what this means is this is clearly a weaponization of the judicial process in order to silence a political opponent. Because we're talking about here the former president of the United States, who is now the front runner to become the next president of the United States, who's being charged on these crazy, insane technicalities and called a convicted felon just to get him out of the race, just to get him to lose. That's all it comes down to. That's the whole thing. And to be honest, in my mind, they've finally crossed the line. Enough is enough. Here we go, folks. Here it comes. That's right, baby. I'm on Team Trump. I would just say here, for those who are just listening and watching, I just put a MAGA hat on, which I purposely have never worn because I've never had one, and I would never wear it. But at this point, I just feel like we've crossed a line, and we have to basically recognize the situation we're in today. To me, this has nothing to do with Donald Trump, actually. I haven't actually changed my views of Donald Trump one iota. However, I am basically now completely supporting Donald Trump personally. By the way, just so people know, this isn't like an endorsement of Donald Trump. I'm just some dude. It's not like Crisis Magazine endorses candidates. We'll probably have articles in the future criticizing Donald Trump. But the fact is that I now support him because I just feel like this, again, is not about Donald Trump. This is about our whole political system, our whole judicial system. Now, just to get clear kind of how I got to this point, it actually happened over a week. About 2 weeks ago, I never would have thought I'd be this pro-Trump right now. But ultimately, that's exactly what's happened. And I'll tell you why. First, now, just so people know, ideologically, kind of politically, I align most with the Libertarian Party. Now, for people who just have the kind of stereotype of the Libertarian Party, you probably laugh about that. That's fine. But I've followed the Libertarian Party closely over the past few years, and I'm most aligned with that. And about a week ago, the Libertarian National, 2 weeks ago, I guess it was now, Libertarians had their national convention, and they invited Donald Trump and RFK Jr. and Vivek Ramaswamy to come and speak. And at the convention, Donald Trump made concessions to the Libertarians. One thing he said, be very pro-crypto, pro-Bitcoin, which I like. He also said he'd appoint a Libertarian to his cabinet, which is great. And so essentially, his whole speech was basically saying, hey, we can have a common cause here, Libertarians. And I think basically I was like, okay, that makes sense. And then the Libertarian Party went and nominated, and there's a whole bunch of reasons for this I'm not going to get into here, nominated the most woke, awful candidate possible. They had a candidate that was more right-wing, conservative, but libertarian that they could, and he came in second. But instead, they voted a openly gay, pro-abortion, pro-trans, like children type of person as their nominee. I had always had in the back of my mind that I would have an option for the Libertarian candidate because I thought the other guy was going to win. I was like, well, if push comes to shove, I can just vote for that guy as a third party candidate because that would have been a good conscience vote. And by the way, just so you know, my voting is never that strategic. Mine's just like, what do I think is the right thing for me to do? That's how I vote. And so I was like, okay, I always had that as a backup. I will also be honest with you right here. I like RFK Jr. I don't care what you say. I like him. I'm not saying I agree with him. I think some of his positions are awful. But I think he's also the only one of the big three that has read a book. He's the only one that really thinks through things and has considered things deeply. And I think he's very good on some very important issues. He's horrific on abortion, of course. But honestly, his position isn't that different from Donald Trump's. And he's horrific on Israel. But that's the same as basically Trump and Biden. But he's very good on certain issues. And so I was like, I don't think I ever would have voted for RFK, but I was considering like, okay, I do like him. I like listening to him. I like a lot of stuff he has to say. So anyway, but in the end, though, after what happened to the Libertarian Party, with both Donald Trump showing up and saying, hey, I think we can work together, Libertarians. I'll do some things that make you happy. And then what happened with the convictions? I felt like, okay, this is ridiculous now. I'm not going to do this. In fact, I did something I've only done once before in my life. I donated to a presidential campaign. I donated to Rand Paul's presidential campaign back in 2016 when he was the first to accept Bitcoin. And then I was one of those many people who donated in that first day after the convictions to Donald Trump's campaign. Because I felt like it needs to be said. It's kind of like when everybody went out and bought the Harrison Butker jerseys after what happened to him. It was a way to say, listen, normal people know what's going on here and we're ticked off about it. And in fact, he raised, $52 million in the first 24 hours after the convictions were announced, which is by far the largest ever. I mean, I remember Biden's team was making a big deal a few months ago and they made like 25 million in a weekend. Well, Trump made 52 million in a day. And so I really do think that. So I donated his campaign, and now I'm honestly, I'm in, guys. All my Trump friends. Now I will say this: I still don't like him. My opinion of Donald Trump has not changed one iota from 2 weeks ago. What's changed though is that it's clear that there is a huge effort to silence him and to get him out of the race. And in my mind, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Because if there's one thing I have always recognized about Donald Trump is he has the best enemies. What I mean by that is his enemies are the worst people in the world. They are by far the worst people in the world. They're the people who hate me. The people who hate Donald Trump hate me as well. They hate you if you're listening to this because you're a practicing Catholic, more than likely, or at least a practicing conservative Christian. They hate you. And they will do anything to destroy you. We saw that during COVID. And by the way, I don't think Donald Trump was very good at COVID. I think he was terrible, frankly, during COVID. Again, my view of him has not changed. But my view of the situation has changed. And now what I see is that I feel like I have to do something. Do I think he will actually be allowed to win? Notice I didn't say be allowed to win, be allowed to be in the White House. I don't know. I mean, clearly they will stop at nothing. And so the likelihood of him actually getting into the White House, I think, is actually still very slim. But I'm not responsible for that. I'm just responsible for what I can do. Excuse me. And I think if he actually becomes president, I don't think he'll be a great president. I still don't think he'll be a great president. Now, I will say he will be a lot better than Joe Biden or RFK on some of the most important issues, which is particularly when it comes to foreign policy. The one thing I do think Donald Trump is very good at is keeping us out of wars. Now, he should have done more. Okay, fine. When he was president to end wars, I do think that. But the fact is, the one thing he's good at keeps us out of war. I honestly believe if he gets elected and he becomes president, the war in Ukraine will end very shortly after that. I also think the I'm not as confident about this one, but I think the Israeli-Gaza conflict will probably be resolved as well. Not permanently resolved, obviously, but at least the horrific things that are happening in Gaza right now will stop. But most importantly, I don't think he will get us into World War III, which is probably the most important thing right now. Is I think, honestly, Joe Biden's team, not Joe Biden, he doesn't know what's going on. Joe Biden's team is trying to get us into World War III. And I think, honestly, it might be like a COVID thing. Like, let's use COVID to get Biden elected. I think they might try to get World War III started so that either there is an election or that somehow we rally around the flag, which is Joe Biden, and he gets reelected. I don't put it past him at this point. So I do think Donald Trump would be good about that. I also think I'm hoping he would keep his promises to the libertarians. I think that would be something I would support, obviously. Here's another thing I think would happen, a good thing that could happen if Donald Trump actually becomes president. I think it increases the chances of secession, which I think is a good thing. I've long been publicly supportive of the country breaking up. But here's the thing. The right likely won't secede from a liberal president, a liberal government. But I could see the left doing that. If California or New York, Oregon, whatever, if Donald Trump's president, I could see him not necessarily seceding, but like breaking apart even more. We have seen that some after COVID, like Florida, Texas, some others becoming more independent, not following the federal lead, which is a good thing. And I think you'd see that then all of a sudden on the left, where all of a sudden California and New York would stop following the federal lead, which I actually think is a good thing ultimately, because I do think that we're too big to succeed. I do think we need to break up. I don't think we should be this humongous. I don't think a government of our size can be a successful, liberty-oriented government. So I think actually in that sense, I do think it is. Now, here's the thing. The question becomes, when I talk about secession, obviously civil war comes up, about violence. I mean, I think I've been pretty clear. I'm not advocating violence. I still am not advocating violence. I hope for a peaceful secession. It has happened in the past in other countries. It can happen here. That being said, the lengths that the elites, the people in charge are going to crush any dissent, history just tells a story, and it's not a good one. And that story is this almost always leads to violence. Almost always leads to violence. And I think, honestly, they're hoping for it in this case. They're hoping somebody does something stupid in response to Donald Trump's convictions, or if he goes to jail or something like that, in order to pin another January 6th, in order to try to bring down the pro-Trump movement. I honestly think that's what they're hoping for more than anything. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if some crazy leftist tries to act like a right-winger and does something crazy in order to just get this going. But ultimately, the reason I'm kind of pro-secession and pro this is because I think the key point here is that I don't see how we can be united. We literally have two different views of reality in this country. I mean, yes, it's not that basic. There's nuance and there's, scaling, whatever. But ultimately, we have two different views of reality. On the one hand are people who think they can create their own reality. They can say, I'm a man, I'm a woman, whatever you want at that moment. And that's reality. And then you have people who believe reality is outside of themselves, not controlled by them, not something they determine, but is determined by a higher power. And those two different viewpoints, worldviews, they can't live together permanently. Eventually, there's going to be a divorce. That's just the reality. And so my hope is that we move that along in peaceful ways so eventually we do break up. And so whether or not that happens, I don't think it would happen under Donald Trump. If he won the 4 years of him, I do think it could happen though. Now, okay, one thing I want to say about all this. I want to say a word to Trump supporters out there. You guys got to chill out a little bit about people who aren't cultishly pro-Trump like you might be. I mean, when I wrote an article last week about this, and I said at the beginning, I don't like Donald Trump. I gave a couple reasons why. Very short paragraph, just saying I don't like him. But then I talked about how awful this prosecution, the persecution of Donald Trump is. I got an email from somebody who said, you clearly support the child murder lover named Biden. And I got another one from somebody else criticizing me, saying how awful I was because I don't like Donald Trump. What a terrible person I am. That basically Trump is God's chosen one. That Trump is the one who leads us into promised land. That how dare you say anything negative about Donald Trump? You just love Biden. I'm sorry, but I just don't. I have to be me, and I'm not like that. Listen, I love being Catholic. It's the most important thing in my life is my Catholicism, being a member of the Catholic Church. And I criticize all the time the leader of the Catholic Church, Pope Francis. If I'm willing to criticize Pope Francis, you really think I'm not going to criticize Donald Trump, a political leader? I mean, if there's one person in the entire world I'm the most hesitant to criticize publicly, it would be the Pope because he's the Pope. Yet, all of you who kind of listen to me and follow me know I criticize him all the time. So I am going to continue to criticize Trump. I'm not going to all of a sudden act like he is the greatest thing that's ever lived. But I do think that I support now Donald Trump running for president. I do think that people should vote for him. Basically is just a way to try to fight back in the little way we can. I still think my vote doesn't count for very much in the big scheme of things. But it's all I have. I don't have anything else. That's why I vote for third parties a lot of times. Because I feel like it's not about some strategery, as George W. Bush would say, that I can actually have an impact on, but instead it's about me and my conscience. What can I do to try and make this country better? And so a lot of times I will vote for a third party. But this time I don't think, I think the best vote for me, for my conscience, is going to be for Donald Trump because of what they're doing to him. Again, not because of Donald Trump, because this is bigger than Donald Trump. This isn't about Donald Trump. I mean, he says it often. He's right. They can do this to him, who's got all these resources, all this money and everything to defend himself. Why wouldn't they do it to you? And they're going to do it to you. Because like I said, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And the enemies of Donald Trump are my enemies. And they're your enemies as well. They're the Catholic Church's enemies, ultimately. Now, I will say, okay, all this, all my rah-rah, my wearing my MAGA hat and all that, I will say this. He could still lose my support before November. And I think the main thing that would be is he appointed, if he picked Nikki Haley to be his VP. Because here's the thing. With Donald Trump's age and the serious concerns about his safety, let's be honest, Tucker Carlson mentions this a lot. Let's be honest. His safety is in danger. And there's no question that his safety is in danger, that he is a target. So there is a very decent chance that if he was elected, he would not still be alive at the end of his term, which means his vice president matters. If he picks somebody like Nikki Haley, then I don't think I can support him. Okay, actually, this is good. Let me put that comment back up. Eric S., good name. The weird thing is if they had just left Trump alone, I mean, if they had never impeached him or done any of that stuff, then very likely absolutely never would have achieved this popularity. Amen. You're absolutely right, Eric. I wouldn't vote for him. I don't think I would have voted for him if he had just simply, if they had left him alone. But now it's like I'm completely behind him because of what they're doing to him, because I know what it means. I look a little bit deeper than just, do I like his personality? No, I don't like his personality, but I'm not trying to marry him. I'm not going to move in with him or something like that. I just know that he represents something that the worst people in the world hate. And so that's going to be good enough for me. But again, he could lose my vote if he decides, for example, to pick Nikki Haley or like somebody like Lindsey Graham, some terrible person as his VP. Now, most of the people on the that have been named as possibilities, I mean, are all fine with me. Somebody like Ramaswamy, I think would be great. You know, if he picks somebody like that as a running mate, I'd be fine with that. But not somebody like not a complete neocon war hawk, because that would just tell me that he doesn't get it at all. But also, more importantly, that if he doesn't make it through his term, we'd have an awful president. So that would be the only thing. But otherwise, like I said, I'm over 90% chance, you know, I'm definitely voting for him if, like I said, he doesn't do something really stupid between now and November. And it's not because of him. My view of Donald Trump has not changed one iota. But at the same time, what has happened in the world has changed. And for that reason, I am definitely on the MAGA team. Okay, everybody, I think that's it for me. This was a major confession out to the public for everybody. Hope you enjoyed my tech talk or whatever you call it, TED talk, whatever you call these things. Until next time, everybody, God love you.